it's time for me to move away from the game of basketball.
Westbrook stops at the 1 and goes down to a knee.
Bitter labor dispute caused the cancellation of the playoffs.
You don't know when he's going to be back. 2 really serious concussions.
Hello, welcome back to How to Fantasy Sports. In today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look back at week 4 of the NFL season, and we'll take a look ahead at week 5 and what are some of the fantasy moves that we can do to help improve our team. Specifically, what we're going to do is we're going to look at trading. We had some questions recently on the website about trade options for their teams, so we thought we'd look at trading and how best to go about trading to improve your team. Now at this point in the season, we have a pretty good idea on who the good players are, who the bad players are, how they're going to be used during the season, and there really aren't that many options available left on the waiver wire from week to week, aside from maybe a surprise player from here or there. It isn't unless there's an injury to a key player that you're going to find a really good option on the waiver wire anymore. So the only good ways right now to really improve our team is to improve them through trading. Now, when it comes to trading, what you're looking at doing is just trying to improve your team. Now, it doesn't really matter how you go about improving your team. A lot of people, when they're trading, they only really like trading 1 for 1, or they're really trying to look to get back equal value for what they're giving up. When really, if you're, say, trading 1 for 1, a quarterback for a quarterback that have equal points on the season, you're not really improving your team at all, and really the trade is a useless trade unless you actually think that over the remaining course of the season that quarterback is going to be that much better than the other quarterback. Otherwise, that trade is really just an even trade, and it really won't help improve your team. Instead, what you're trying to do is you're going to try and trade away from where you're deepest, what you have a lot of, or where you've got guys that are sitting on your bench that are accumulating a lot of points from week to week, but you can't really find a spot to get them into your team. Those are the guys that you want to trade, and those are the ones that are going to give you an opportunity to take back a player that you can add into your starting lineup. So when you're looking to trade, always try to find someone in your league that is missing what you have a lot of. Say you have a lot of wide receivers, and there's a guy in your league that's short on wide receivers. Always try to target them first, because they're the ones that are most likely to take on your players. And when you're looking to get something back in return, where are the holes in your lineup? Where are the spots that you need to fill in your needs? I mean, if you've already got a top 10 quarterback, it's probably not worthwhile to really chase down a top 10 quarterback. But if you don't have a great option in the tight end position, then try to improve in the tight end position. It sounds obvious, but you get a lot of people that just want to trade straight up position for position, when really that's not what you want to do. You're just trying to improve your team. Now, in general, it is hard to improve on your quarterback or your tight end positions during the regular season. Generally, we have a pretty good idea on who the all-stars are, and because we don't draft that deep into those categories, the people that get one of these higher ranked quarterbacks or tight ends tend to stick with them for the course of the season. So hopefully you've got one already. If not, you're going to have to work really hard to convince someone to part with them. And as always, you're looking at to buy low and to sell high, but sometimes it's also just as important to even sell low. When there's a player that people are down on, maybe you're down on them as well, and no one's really going to take them, it might be worth your while to just cut your losses and get rid of that player, as opposed to just sticking with them and hoping that something will unfold with them, especially as the season goes on and we really have a good sense that there is not going to be an opportunity for this player to get better. It's just important to cut your losses and get rid of them, because they're going to tie up a spot, and mentally it's going to be tough for you to take on other players either from the waiver wire or trading that can really actually help your team, because you're still holding on hope that this player will actually turn value later in the season. So sometimes selling low also just as much of a great option for improving your team for later in the season as selling high is. Now, a couple things about trading. First and foremost, make sure that your offers are at least reasonable, or at least you can rationalize that offer to them. I mean, if it's a trade that you wouldn't do if the situations were reversed, then it's probably not a trade that anyone else can do. But so definitely try to stick with reasonable trade offers, or at least ones that you can rationally back up yourself. And as always, when you're doing trade negotiations, never close a negotiation. Just keep trying to come up with combinations that you think will work to improve your team that someone might agree with. Never close down and walk away. Just always try and find something or some way to keep the conversation going. And hopefully, eventually, at some point, you find a trade that works between your two teams. So when it comes time to buying low, what you really want to do is look for guys that have great future value. And sometimes that can even come from injured players right now, especially as we start ending into bye weeks. You might find team owners can't hold on to some of their injured players, so they might be forced to make a trade to get back some value or something that they can use in the short term, while you pick up a person that you can use in the long term. And so right now, some of the great buy low options that we see out there, as the overall fantasy community outlook for these players seems a little bit down on them, when really we think their outlook still looks quite bright or will improve as the season goes on, and that includes Fred Jackson, Steven Jackson, and even Ryan Matthews from the San Diego Chargers. You might be in a position to pick those guys up at a little bit of a discount, as the sentiment is a little bit low on them right now. Also great options for trying to get to is Jeremy Maclin from the Philadelphia Eagles, and Aaron Hernandez even from the Patriots. He should be back from his injuries in a couple of weeks, so if you have room to stash him on your bench, he should be a very productive tight end for the second half of the season. And so for selling high is always a very tough sell in the fantasy community, because we all differ on where the high point is for any one particular player's trajectory. But the players that we're talking about here, they right now are producing above what we'd expect their overall season average to be. So we do expect some regression from these players. But because they're performing so well, and you can get a lot of incredible wealth back, and it's important to remember that when we're talking about selling these guys, we're not talking about just selling them for anything. We're talking about you being able to get back some really great players that can really help your team in the long run. And specifically, we're talking about for quarterbacks, RG3, who is a very big injury risk in Washington, and as defensive coordinators get more game tape on him, we'll be able to come up with strategies to help minimize his impact in the game. And Andy Dalton, who's performing really, really well, and you probably didn't draft him to be your number one quarterback on your team, so he's probably sitting on your bench not doing much. And now's your chance that we're entering into bye weeks for you to trade him to a team that needs a quarterback for any one particular week, because obviously that he's performing at such a good level. You can get some really good value back in return for him. Other players that we're looking at selling high on include wide receiver Dwayne Bowe, who really is doing all his work in the fourth quarter in garbage time. And while we expect Kansas City to have a lot of garbage time, football game time in them, it's just a very bad fantasy situation where you have to rely on garbage time work for your fantasy player to be relevant. And for running backs, we're looking at Frank Gore and Michael Turner, both guys who have been showing over the last couple of years that they really slow down in the second half of the season, and right now they're performing quite well. So you might be able to convince an owner that this will continue for the second half of the season, when really the outlook for them doesn't look as strong. And of course, Chris Johnson. If you were ever holding on to him, hoping for that 1 week that will really increase his value, I think this is the week. While obviously the offensive line played much better, and chances are it will probably perform sporadically better for the remainder of the season, this is probably your last chance to extract a lot of value out of this player in a trade. So definitely try to be actively shopping Chris Johnson. Okay, so now that we've done taking a look at trading, let's take a look back at week 4 and some of the significant injuries from it, starting with Hakeem Nicks, who continues to battle with his feet and leg problems. Now, the ads here obviously are Ramsey Barden and Dominic Hickson, but really neither of these guys project all that well on any given day, simply in that Eli Manning, he'll just go to who's ever the hot hand or whoever the offensive coordinators have devised a good game plan for. So you won't really know who that is from any week, and if you're plugging in one of these guys into into your lineups, well, you run the risk of coming away with 0 as much as you're running the risk of, or the risk of coming away with 100 yards and a TD. So it's a big gamble to put your money on either of those two wide receivers. Next up is Jake Lockyer, and obviously his shoulder problem hasn't gone away. It looks like he still might be able to fight through it, but definitely Matt Hasselbeck is someone that you're going to want to add into your lineup, as the Tennessee Titans is a team that is going to be throwing it a lot. So whoever is the quarterback for this team, depending on how you're already using that quarterback in your league, this is a player of interest that you might want to consider adding to your bench. Greg Jennings continues to frustrate his owners by not being able to play that much, and really the outlook for him for the next couple of weeks isn't all that strong. Obviously, any Green Bay wide receiver carries some value in that Green Bay offense, but projecting which one on any given week is going to be very, very tough. Obviously, Jordy Nelson still probably retains his number one status out there, but after that, James Jones and Randall Cobb will probably see equal flip-flopping of weeks where they go off for some huge points. So add cautiously and use sparingly in your lineups if possible. And so our final look at the significant injuries from week 4 includes Santonio Holmes. And really, this doesn't stand to help any of the wide receivers on the New York Jets, as that aerial offense is not looking all that strong at all. If anything, the beneficiaries of this injury will probably be the running game. So look to put Sean Green back into your lineup if you were getting away from him, as well as Bilal Powell probably will get a few more carries in the weeks to come as well. And finally, to wrap this up, who are we looking at on the waiver wire? Well, this week we really like Mendenhall. We hope that he is not on your waiver wire anymore. As we've been talking about all season long, the Pittsburgh running game is an absolute mess, and Mendenhall is in a great position to step up and take over basically every down carries on that team. Now, unfortunately, he's probably not going to be the most healthiest of running backs, so you're probably going to get him as your RB2, but definitely worthy of being included on all rosters in all leagues. Make sure he's still not available on your waiver wire. A couple of wide receivers who are getting a lot of attention on the waiver wire. Andre Roberts, who will be next week 5's Golden Tate. That is the guy that you drop just as quickly as you pick up. And Hartline from Miami, who obviously performed incredibly well. Now, what's not getting a lot of attention is Devon Bess actually had 12 targets as well, and he's actually been showing up more often in the target listings than Hartline has. And really, when you're looking at the wide receivers for Miami, we'd probably actually project that Devon Bess has the lower floor. Now, he might not have the higher ceiling that Hartline does, but Hartline has a much lower floor. So depending on what you need from a Miami wide receiver, which really they're going to be throwing it a lot out there, as they do project to be playing from behind quite a bit, depending on what you need from that Miami wide receiver, if you need more consistency, pick up Devon Bess. But if you need to pop a big total, then go for Hartline. But the wide receiver that we actually like this week that isn't really getting a lot of attention is Blackman from the Jacksonville Jaguars, who had 10 targets last week. And now that Laurent Robinson is probably going to have to take some time off, extended time off, because of his concussion issues, Blackman really has a chance to really take over that number one receiving role there. And while it is the Jacksonville Jaguars, that still does carry some value with it. So that's the guy that we'd be looking to add for wide receivers this week. And so that's our wrap of the Week 4 fantasy football season. We hope you enjoyed this and found some information that you found useful. If you have some questions, send us an email at question@howtofantasysports.com. Otherwise, subscribe to this channel to stay tuned for future videos. Thank you very much for watching, and good luck in Week 5.